Awesome. So today we're going to talk about building products people trust. I think this is a really critical topic to talk about, especially in this time when we continue to see products blatantly abuse people's privacy, their security, and just not being responsible for the actual value that they're creating. So why is this important? I fundamentally believe that building products people trust is how you win. And you can win long term if you play this game right. Time and time again, companies can lose tons and tons of users when they violate trust or their users' privacy. We're seeing people flee Facebook right now because of blatant abuse of privacy and security on their platform in ways that we didn't really even understand that could be done. Whereas in comparison, if we look at companies that embrace security and privacy, companies like Apple, they continue to do really, really amazing things at huge scale. So to start, I want to build a little trust with you about me. As it was mentioned, I have a background in theater and dance, which I always like to talk about because it's important that you bring in people with different backgrounds. I think you fundamentally build better products when you have diverse people actually building them. My focus is on usability, so as a user experience designer, I've now turned product manager. And a lot of companies that maybe you know locally that I've worked for. Ultimately, I work at high-scale, high-growth technology companies. That's where I think there's a really interesting point of when a company grows really, really fast, you have to be careful not to make terrible decisions with your product that impact millions and millions of people. So what are we going to talk about today? First, I want to talk about fundamentally what is trust. Trust is something we understand as a whole, but it's really hard to put your finger exactly on what we mean by trust. I want to look at the types of trust that you can build. And we'll look at a couple of psychologists' definitions of how to actually build trust. We'll talk about why trust matters. Why does your product need to build trust? We'll look at what I like to call trust fails, products that have done this miserably, and some of the results from that. And then we'll look at actually how do you build trust into your products. So I fundamentally believe that trust underlies every single day of our experience. You drove in a car here today. You didn't even notice that you were trusting that other drivers on the road understand what the little dotted lines on the road mean. That it's a lane that you stay in, and that cars go one direction and cars go in the other. It's something that we don't even think about. But this is a moment of trust where you're actually trusting that other drivers agree with some set of rules that are unspoken. So what is trust? We're going to look at this through the frame of these two women. They've done research a lot around the areas of trust, and I don't want to recreate the wheel here. Frances Faye, you may have heard of her actually. She was an executive at Uber. Lots of really interesting things happened at Uber and are continuing to happen at Uber, particularly related to trust. She was brought in based on her experience at Harvard to come in and basically change the way Uber as a company thinks about trust. And then we've got Rachel Botsman. She's an author of a wonderful book that if you like this talk, I encourage you to go read, Who Can You Trust? Looking at how you build trust in communities. So I want to start with this first concept of peer-to-peer trust. This is something that every single person in the world fundamentally understands at some level. How do we build trust to another person? A one-to-one. And she believes that basically trust is a three-principle concept. And if you have authenticity, if you have logic, and if you have empathy, that trust stool stands up. But if you are missing any one of these things, it falls over and you lose trust. So what does she mean by these? You're more likely to trust me if I'm being authentic. Part of why I talk openly about my experiences, because that's a way to start building trust. If you sense that someone's being honest and truthful for you, you're more likely to trust them. Second, if you sense that there's actually logic, or there's rigor to my logic. Basically, you can follow my train of thought and see logically how I progress to the decision or the thing that I'm trying to convey to you. You can understand my perspective. And then finally, if you believe that my empathy is directed towards you, you're more likely to trust me. That's a pretty basic thing. We like to feel like the other person understands and hears us. These three things together are the fundamental concepts of trust to another human being. Makes a lot of sense, really obvious. I want to take a real quick detour here and talk about rigor and logic, because this is actually something that's fundamentally changed the way that I work. There's two ways to show your logic, basically. You have one where you go tell a long story, prove all your points, and then you come to this magical bang moment of, and here's the idea that I came to. There's the other model where you start with, here's what I want you to walk away with, and then I'm going to talk you through why and how I came to that conclusion. There's one problem with this model. It's human attention. And I hate to say it, but the one lady in the audience, you probably have understood this by being cut off early on and not getting your point heard. Women tend to start with the one where they take you on a journey to tell you what their conclusion is. Men generally start up front. I actually used to go on really long journeys. In fact, that's kind of what this presentation is. I'll hit you with a point later. But you've got to make sure that that content is really attention grabbing, or else you never actually get to make your point. And I think this is true in your product too. If your product doesn't immediately tell me what value it's solving for me, I don't care, and I'm going to get distracted by the 50 million other things that are happening in my life today. So be upfront. So now I want to move to talk about how do you build trust in communities, a human to humans. What does that look like? So Rachel believes that trust is a confident relationship with the unknown. It's actually the mechanism that we use to build confidence when we are in a situation that we don't understand. I love this tweet. I think it's fantastic. We used to say, your mom would tell you, like, don't talk to strangers on the internet and don't get in a car with a stranger. Now we actually summon strangers from the internet and they drive us places. Not only that, but we actually stay in strangers' homes too with Airbnb. This is completely changing the way that we build and conceptualize trust. So she talks about this as a trust leap. Basically, you're putting trust in some platform that there's some value that you're wanting to gain there, and you're willing to make that leap into the unknown, to get into a stranger's car, to stay at a stranger's house, or let a stranger stay in your house. We talked about Airbnb. I like Airbnb because they are actually talking about how they build trust in their platform. Their blog, their design blog, goes into a lot of the ways that they build trust in their platform. Whenever you come on board as an Airbnb user, there's two different types of experiences. People who are inviting people to stay in their homes and people who are looking for homes. When you list your home on Airbnb, there's a whole lot of steps about what types of content, how to take good photos, ratings and reviews to help build trust and confidence that your home is a safe place for people to stay in. And on the reverse side, if you're looking to stay at an Airbnb house, when you onboard as an end user, they step you through how to upload a profile and provide demographic information. You have a history and a score as you stay at various properties and get a reputation rating that a homeowner can actually see when they're deciding if they want to accept your stay. Really fascinating. And Rachel's book goes into a lot of details about both Uber and Airbnb. So if you're interested in this concept, her book does a wonderful job explaining this. But ultimately, she calls this the trust stack. That when there's something that we kind of sense the value, but we don't understand, or there's uncertainty in it, what needs to happen for us to be able to trust that platform? The first thing is we have to trust the idea. Both parties have to individually want to be part of the platform. You need to like the idea that, hey, I have an extra room in my house. I want to make some extra money. I'll let someone stay in that room. And then on the other side, you have someone who maybe doesn't want to stay at a hotel, wants a cheaper rate, or to have a more local experience. They're both buying into the idea of the platform of Airbnb. The same thing is true with Uber. People want to go somewhere, and I want to make money driving people somewhere. Second, you have to trust the platform. You have to believe that the platform is looking out for you. In Airbnb, you hope that the platform is going to blacklist homeowners who are trying to scam people, or crazy partiers who are just looking to trash a house. You're trusting that the platform is doing the work to try to maintain health and safety. And then finally, you actually want to build trust with that other user. When you get connected to an Uber driver, or an Uber driver decides to pick you up, how do they make that decision that this is not some drunk idiot at 2 a.m. who's going to throw up in my car? That's what the platforms are doing. They're building a reputation rating, ratings and reviews. There's lots of ways to do this. But if you can trust in the idea, the platform, and then the other users on that platform, you can easily build that trust to get two completely unknown people, strangers, to go in on an idea and actually create value. Now, what's interesting is that Rachel talks about how trust is changing, and particularly how technology is speeding up that change of trust. When you think about humanity as a whole, we started with local trust. When humans were just cavemen or small cities, we didn't have the ability to fly to different continents. It was really as far as I could actually walk myself. There was really a small handful of people that would know me for my entire life as a cave person. Very local trust. I've grown up with my next door neighbor next to me. I know who they are. I know their character. Like, I can vouch for them. It's very local trust. And then as we industrialize, people start moving. People have carts. They can now go much, much further than they could have ever have walked. We have airplanes. You can now fly across oceans that before you could have never crossed. So we need a concept of portable trust. How can you trust in random strangers who are literally coming from overseas or from other countries that you don't know anything about? That's where we have institutional trust. Things like governments, things like banks, where individual companies and corporations and institutions actually stand as a way to measure trust between two unknown parties. And now we're actually starting to move into distributed trust, where you actually don't need to know anything about the other person, that you can trust in the system. Things like Airbnb and Uber are examples of distributed trust, where we can take distributed assets and create unified value across them. And what's really interesting is that technology is helping this move even faster. So I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I think it's an interesting talk about why is distributed trust better than institutional? When you think about institutional trust, your bank, the government, you may not know how that actually works. It's a big monolithic thing that you don't really have transparency into how it works. It's a closed system. You don't really have direct control over, or if you do, it's through a long, arduous process of policy change, etc. It's a centralized thing. There's a single point of failure for many of these institutional systems. And it's a very top-down approach. You have to trust that the institution has your best interest in mind. And that may not actually be true. Whereas distributed trust is transparent. We all know collectively how that distributed platform works. We have visibility into it. It's by definition inclusive, because there's no one single party that gets to decide how it works. It's decentralized. There's no one single point of failure. As we talk about security and technology solutions, decentralization is great. It helps build resilient systems. It's accountable. And then it actually is bottom up. There's no one single authority. Instead, everyone collectively gets to decide how that thing works. So let's look at how trust leaps are accelerating. And it's really this idea of how do we move from local to institutional and to distributed. And certainly there's some future state of this as well. If we look at personal transportation, like I mentioned, before it was as far as I could walk. And then we invented the wheel and the cart, and we could go much further distances. Then the train and the automobile and the airplane. You can see how technology allows us to go farther, faster, and to broaden our experience and our horizons. The same thing's true with payments. In the early days, you need to barter. You need to have something to trade that was worth value. We then moved into physical currency, where we abstract that it doesn't matter that you want a chicken and I don't have a chicken. I can trade coins instead. We moved to credit cards, where when you think about it, a credit card's a really weird mechanism. Checks are also the very same way. It's basically just an IOU. And as we move to centralized banks, where we have money in our bank accounts that we can trade via swiping a little plastic credit card or writing an IOU on a paper check. Now we're moving into digital payments. I can pay with things with my watch. And that's actually not a bank account number at all. It's just a transaction ID. And we're now moving into things like Bitcoin and blockchain-based currency, where transactions can globally be trusted because there's a central ledger. You can see how technology is enabling a lot of these advancements and allowing us to move faster. And that really is what the focus of this is that technology really accelerates the rate at which we make these trust leaps, and it further distributes trust. I think this is a really powerful concept, but it's one that comes with great responsibility. So I want to actually now pivot into talking about types of trust. So we looked at trust peer-to-peer, a human to a human, and then we looked at trust in communities. Let's look at now the types of trust that you build with people and in communities. This is from a study by HSBC. They're a bank, an international bank. Study, 12,000 participants across 11 countries. It's pretty globally representative. There's a full report if you want to search for technology and trust, or trust in technology. Really awesome report that has some great data and statistics. But they have this chart that I really like. Basically, you have an interaction level, something very, very shallow that you don't really care about, or something very deep that's a very deep relationship. And then you've got a long-term relationship, something that you don't expect to change, and then you've got a temporary relationship. And when you divide the quadrant up like this, you end up with a really interesting grid, where up in the top corner, long-term and deep, that's love. That's relationships. You expect that person to have a very deep and long-term connection with. On the contrary, temporary and shallow, something that is very, very temporary, very lustful. Shallow and long-term is something necessary. We don't really care about it, but it's something we're investing in long-term. And then finally, deep and temporary, something that we choose because it's functional. It provides value to us. So let's look at a couple of things on this map. Pretty obvious. Up in the corner, love. Family and friends. These are people that we build long-term relationships, build deep trust with them. On the other end, we have lust. Startups and new technologies, blockchain, and whatever the new JavaScript language is today, or a library. These things come, they go, we forget about them, and it's very, very infrequent that these things move out of that stage. In the necessary side, we have things like government, work, financial institutions, things that we just have to have, even though we may not want to do them. Who here likes their bank? Nobody. We have our banks because we need them. We need a place to put our money so that we can have credit cards and actually buy the things that we want. We may not really like government. We may not agree with government, but we can all see the value and the organization and the structure that that brings to our countries. And then at the top, you have the functional. And the functional is what we deal with every single day. It's the things you choose because it makes sense. Experts. You go and see a doctor who knows about the very specific issue that you have. You trust them because of their institutional knowledge. You've got things like objects, cars, phones, laptops. We choose these devices because they help us accomplish something. It's functional. And websites, things that provide us some amount of value, and the moment that they don't, they go away. So let's keep looking at this. They actually did an interesting look at brands. What I find fascinating is Apple and Samsung. Remember, this is a global study. Apple's there for primarily the United States. Samsung is for many of the Asian countries. These are companies that have transcended just functionality to actually creating fans who love their products. I personally live in the Apple ecosystem. I have one of every Apple device sitting on this desk right now. That's something where Apple has created not only devices that are functional, but that I actually really like using, that I love using. Every new Apple product I'll go out and buy. Samsung, I personally believe differently about that, but Samsung is loved on the other side of the world, largely because their products are priced more sensitively to the countries where maybe you're not looking for a premium product. Whenever you are talking about a company or a brand, I really like this framework because it challenges you to ask what value is a product providing you and how deep is that relationship. So why do we care about this? What's interesting? So this study also asked the question of, I believe technology will make the world a better place. You see the United States here, 67% of people believed that that was true. That's actually the global average, which I think is an interesting note. But you'll notice that some of the Asian countries, it's a much higher percentage. Technology-forward countries like China and Japan and Asia. You see countries like the European Union, where that's a little lower. That kind of explains why we're seeing things like GDPR. Much more concern about how technology is changing the way that we interact with our world. They went a step further and then asked people, have you heard of this technology? Very, very simple. Have you heard of blockchain? 59% of people had not heard of blockchain. What's interesting about this is that after they asked them if they hadn't heard it, they gave them a one-sentence overview of what that is, and people dramatically became much more accepting of that technology. People didn't know what robo-advisors were for using artificial intelligence algorithms. They give them a one-sentence description of what that is, and people are like, oh, yeah, okay, I could see the value in that. I use that. It's interesting in that it's very, very simple things, like giving very basic definitions of what technology does that makes people much more open to using it. This isn't super complicated. And certainly, as people learn more about technologies, they become more normalized. We now see peer-to-peer payments and fingerprint recognition, things that we generally accept now that were very controversial when they first came out. A great lesson where just by helping your users understand what your technology or what your product can do can really go a long way to building trust. Now here's the slide that really upsets me. In this study, they asked people, what are the things that concern you most? And this is sort of how the question came out. I'll quickly mention that you'll see the colors represent different generations. There's not much difference in generational perception of different challenges. But there's one thing that stands out to me about this entire graph. All these things with red arrows are technology fails. People, common day concerns are concerned about their data being leaked, bank accounts being hacked, debit cards being cloned, identity theft, email scams, begging for money. These are literally problems that are causing people everyday worry and concern, more so than being lied to by a close family member, or buying something faulty or fake, or actually physical harm by being mugged. We're literally causing people daily distress with the technology that we're building because we're not doing it and building it in responsible ways. This slide makes me really upset and angry because I do fundamentally believe technology can make the world a better place, but not when we're not being responsible with it. Technology distrust causes a lot of our daily worry and anxiety, and it doesn't need to be that way. And that's what this talk is about, is how can we build products in a way that people trust them and that we respect people's privacy and help them be more secure. So I want to now use some examples, what I like to call trust fails. I'm not doing this to call out particular companies, but I think seeing examples of why certain data breaches or privacy violations are problematic. I'll start with the first one, which I'm sure you're all tired of hearing about, Equifax. What's interesting about Equifax is that the scale of the data breach and the fact that the people whose data was breached didn't necessarily even know Equifax had it or even knew why they had that data. Equifax, of course, is a credit monitoring service. They collect financial information to make literal decisions about if you should get loans or be able to buy a car. They're getting all of this information without your permission or knowledge, and then they're not protecting it. Things like your social security information, things that can't be changed. Your name, your address, your gender, your phone, your driver's license photo, your passports, actual military and state IDs. This is just blatantly terrible. A company that you didn't know whose data, that had your data, then didn't responsibly secure it. Absolutely unacceptable. And then they're using that data to make decisions that can literally lose you the ability to buy a house or a car or whatever that thing is. Next is one that hits me very close. I am an openly gay man. Grindr is a hookup app. Unfortunately, they leaked location data. Basically, it's a location-based app to find other gay people around you. Literally, with an unauthenticated API that anyone on the internet could pull, you could pull exact GPS locations of users, particularly in a minority class. I travel a lot, and there are countries where I can literally be put to death, and this app is leaking my exact geo-coordinate. That's really problematic, really concerning, and an app that's supposed to bring community and connectiveness actually puts me at risk. And most people don't even know that this is a problem. Secondly, they had a third-party data leakage. They allow you to set HIV status in the application, and unfortunately, they were sending that to third-party analytics company. First of all, without an unencrypted connection, so anyone could sit in and read those messages. And then secondly, literally, it's tying your username, your email, your geolocation to your HIV status. This is something that should be healthcare data, HIPAA compliant, and it's not. Literally, unencrypted, can easily be watched, and it's tied to GPS location. Like, oh my God, this is terrible. These things have been fixed. Interestingly enough, I've done data requests with all of the major dating apps, OkCupid, Tinder, Grindr, Scruff. Grindr is the one company that has yet to send me data. And I would tell you, the data that I've gotten from these companies is terrifying. Every time you log into a dating app, it's got your exact geolocation, and it's got that history for every single time you've opened that app. Why? Why do companies need that data? They do not. There is no reason that they needed that data. And certainly if they're going to collect that data to provide their service, it's their responsibility to secure that. Next, this was earlier this year, the FBI sent out an urgent request, go restart and update your routers, because Russian malware is now sitting on major brands like Linksys, Netgear, and TCP-Link, routers that are very likely in your homes. And what's difficult is, I don't know about y'all, but have you tried to update your router software? Not exactly something, I struggle with it, and I know what I'm doing. I can't call my mom and say, oh, yep, gotta go update that router software, good luck. I don't even think she has the cord to go and plug in to be able to do it. 500,000 routers in at least 54 countries. This is less problematic if it were easy to update, but the fact that it's not easy to do, literally the hardware itself is compromised, your host. And if you don't update the software properly, the malware gets back on there and it watches every single thing you do online. Hugely problematic. Again, companies that aren't doing their job to help keep their products secure. This one's fun. Who here has an Alexa device in their house? Okay, less than I would have thought. Okay. There was a woman in Portland where basically she was having a private conversation in her living room with her husband and somehow said a series of trigger words where Alexa engaged a phone call with one of her contacts and then streamed the audio from her living room. Her friend then called her a few minutes later and said, hey, were you just talking to your husband about this thing? And she was like, what? What are you talking? How do you know that that was happening? She literally did not know that she had triggered a hot mic in her own living room that was streaming her private conversation. And we're literally choosing to put these devices in our homes every single day. Facebook, I'm not even going to talk much about this, the Cambridge Analytica scandal, how they're using psychographic data to rig elections. Basically, those cute little quizzes we all played for years that told you like what character you were in a TV show or what show you liked, leveraging psychographic data to then target you with ads to change your perception and to basically try to sway elections. What's interesting to me in this one is that this was using data that we voluntarily gave but didn't realize how it could be used against us. Facebook wasn't putting proper controls around our personal data in their platform, and then that was used to buy ads against us. It doesn't stop there, though. Facebook, you may use them, log in with Facebook, that little SSO link. That seems like a good idea. Yeah, I don't need to create a username and password that I have to remember. Awesome. Great, except just a few weeks ago, Facebook had nearly 500,000 of their SSO login tokens compromised. I don't know about you, but I don't know every single website that I gave Facebook SSO access into. There is a settings panel buried behind 10 menus where you can see all of those applications. I looked at mine, 347 websites that I had SSO tokens for through Facebook. As a user, there's no possible way I could have known the risk vector there, much less, how do you actually go and change that? What do you actually do at that point? Facebook told us months after that compromise had happened, you literally have already been compromised in systems that you don't even think Facebook is associated with. Very problematic. It doesn't stop there though. Facebook just a couple weeks ago released this device called Portal that's literally a video and audio communication channel so you can chat with your friends and family. Okay, interesting. It's sort of like Alexa. Guess what they use it for? First of all, I love this photo. Zuckerberg, CEO of Facebook, if you look at his laptop here, he's got tape over both the microphone and the camera on his laptop. He doesn't even trust the devices that he's using every single day. But yet his company is building an always-on microphone and video camera that you put in your home. This is from a couple days ago. Facebook admits that its camera-equipped listening device can collect your data for ads. They pitch this product as something to connect with your family and to always stay in touch, and instead are listening in to those conversations and marketing to you to ads. We've all had that weird case where you say something in a conversation and then weirdly, like, you start getting marketing ads in all over the internet, and you're like, how did they know that? This is how they know that. There's literally a device now that they're selling that does this, and they're actually admitting that they're doing it. So that brings me to, how do we build trust in these products? It's a difficult thing to do. We've talked about what trust is, what it means, but it's very, very different to actually build that in your products. We looked at some examples of products that failed at this. I fundamentally don't think these companies maliciously were like, yeah, we're going to put a piece of hardware in someone's house so that we can listen to it and collect and market ads to people. I don't think that's what's happening here. This is where companies are making very isolated decisions that cascade into unforeseen problems. The Grindr example, they asked for HIV data to help everyone be more informed on the platform, but then accidentally didn't implement it right, and then started spewing that data all over the internet. We're making these decisions maybe with the right heart and mean, but then don't take the responsibility for what that actually means for our products. So what I'm really talking about when building trust in products is, how do you build trust to a machine? It's a very different concept. The machine, I can't look at a machine and look at how it's looking back at me, or if it's mad at me and doesn't want to talk. You don't have that feedback mechanism. So it's very different to actually build trust with machines. I go back to this mechanism. This is something where I sort of plotted various types of things and how they fall on this. So we talked about like fanboys that Apple has, people who love technology. You've got your phones, your wearables. I put wearables at the very top because it's something literally you wear on your person that collects data, very deep connection, but it's still temporary. The moment my Apple Watch breaks, I'm not going to use it anymore. What's interesting is that Fitbit did a marketing blog post a few years ago where they thought it would be fun to aggregate everyone's data anonymously to try to make broad strokes about what people are doing. And the blog post basically was, what is everyone doing at 8 p.m. at night? There's a sudden spike, and everyone's like going and exercising. Not exactly what I want my fitness data to be used for a fun, cheeky blog post. They're talking about sex. People have sex at night. And by aggregating and time adjusting that, they were able to see spikes literally in people's fitness trackers. I don't like that. I did not consent to my data being used for cute, cheeky blog posts, even if you are anonymizing that data. It's not okay. We have things like banks and governments. We use them because they're necessary and they have high switching costs. It's difficult to move banks. It takes a long time. You lose access to your money for some amount of time. You've got transactional things that we just use them because we have to, payments or websites, SSO logins. We have fun little things that are lusty, like as seen on TV. Like we're going to laugh at it, we're going to think about it for 10 minutes, and we're never going to remember it ever again. So when you look at the failures of what actually causes these things to fail, with functional items, it's literally breakage or it fails. You just stop using it because it doesn't provide any function. Privacy violations. You know, if I'm wearing a connected device and it's spewing data all over the internet, I'm going to stop wearing that device. With love, family and friends, you've got things like betrayal and scandal that ruin those relationships. And then with lustful things, it's just either not important so you forget about it, or it has no utility so you just don't do anything with it. With necessary things, it's that constant like, oh, there's another fee from my bank, there's another thing that's annoying to me, they're not meeting my expectations, and that finally builds up to a point where I stop using that altogether. So what's interesting about this is that I think trust fundamentally is a differentiator for tech products. You can totally change the growth curve of your company if you build products that people trust. People, when they trust your products, they become advocates for your products. And your growth curve tilts up. But how do we actually build that trust? It's difficult. We talked about how do you think about trust, but how do you actually build it in practice? I want to, again, go back to the principles of how we build trust with people and how we build trust in communities. That authenticity, that logic, and empathy. The competency and reliability and honesty. These are words that generally we like, that are things that we would like our products and the services that we use to honor. So I want to go through a couple of examples of just very obvious things that you should do. And I hope that there's no one single way to say how to build trust in your products because they're so different. But I hope this gives you some things that you can remember and talk with your teams. We talked a lot about Alexa and how I maybe don't like it, but I think it does a really great job at being clear. When the light's blue, it's listening. That is such a genius idea. I literally, a 3-year-old can understand how Alexa works. I talk to it, the light's on, awesome, I can ask it for something. And I want you to build consistency into your products. This is from the Apple Human Interface Guidelines. Google and Facebook and other companies have their own as well. Use these. These are designed because it's what people expect software to do. When you're choosing to not follow patterns on platforms, you're actively choosing to trick people and to confuse people. If you're going to violate this, you need to have a really, really good reason why. For example, on macOS, the blue button is the primary action that you were intending to take. This is a secondary, are you sure you want to do that? Yes, I want to securely empty my trash. And give me a little context about what that actually means. And then I want you to provide continuously prove value of your product. This is from Kissmetrics, an email marketing platform. They help you understand what their product does for you. This many people converted through your campaign on our platform. Literally data to prove that the proposition that you're signing up a product to be used for is providing value to you. So in summary, education is very simple. You need to prove your product's competency and show the logic of your product. Make it clear what's happening and why. What is it doing? Do people understand what it's doing? And then shoot for value. I don't use services because it's just incrementally better. I want to use a service because it's 10 times better than what I'm doing today. I use a spreadsheet for something. I'm not going to replace some new fancy app unless it provides me 10x value than that spreadsheet. You need to build consistency because consistency builds confidence in your product across the entire product suite. As your company grows, you get lots of teams that start doing things in isolated manners that maybe aren't consistent across the platform. You need to be consistent. It drives a trust in your entire product suite. And then you need to be relevant. Humans contextualize interactions. If I'm talking with my mom, I'm going to have a very different conversation with her than I'm going to have with a random stranger. We contextualize things. Your products should contextualize as well. And should have some common sense into it. This is an actual story where travel software, someone went and typed Paris into it. And it was like, cool, great, $4,700 or whatever price it was. And they're like, awesome, yes, I'm going to book that. What did they book? It It was not a trip to Paris, France. It was a trip to Paris, Texas. And it was so expensive because you can't fly to Paris, Texas. You have to fly to another place, get on a train, and then rent a car. What? Who Googles, I want a trip to Paris, Texas? Nobody. If you're a travel platform, you know that when someone types Paris, they want a trip to Paris, France. Basic common sense into your products. And simplicity wins. Alexa's blue when it's listening, and it's red when it's muted. We can argue about if this is actually muted or not, but that's a different talk for a different day. Again, the UI principles of Alexa are genius. And that's why they're in everyone's homes, because it's obvious how it works. This is Spotify. I love Spotify. I think it's cool. It suggests new music that I would have never chosen to use. But this is an actual error I got one day. An error occurred. Why is my music not playing? That's all I care about. I use a VPN which had gotten disconnected and triggered, I can't connect to the internet to stream your song. Okay, that's context that you could have given me. You lost internet access. Great, I know how to solve that problem. I don't know how to solve this problem. Build empathy into your products. If they error, don't blame me, because I don't know how your product works. You can design empathy into your products. This is something MailChimp does. When you type a username and password, it's going to tell you, hey, we don't have an account for that. Do you need to request what your username is? Little tiny moments of empathy actually help me use the product and help me actually accomplish the thing that I was there to get. Now you may ask, wait, this can be abused. Yes, you're right, it can be abused. But what's interesting is that they're actually using this abuse vector where someone could basically enumerate usernames. They're using a web application firewall, a WAF, to block that. You can only do this 3 times before it says, nope, you're a robot who's trying to enumerate usernames. But then they also collect those malicious IPs and use that to block across their platform. They're using a moment of empathy to actually collect data about their malicious attackers and then blocking that across their entire platform. That's a really cool moment where you gave value and you created value for yourself internally. There are tons of moments where you can do exactly this, rather than say, nope, we're not going to build that feature because it's a security risk. Probably not, or there's at least ways to mitigate that. Chrome is another interesting one to look at. They invented the concept of auto-update. When was the last time you thought about updating Chrome? Never, because it's always up to date. It can patch at any velocity that it wants because it does it for you behind the scenes. That's awesome. Take the mental load of having to, what version am I on? Like Java's out of date. Like I know there's something bad about Java, so hopefully I'm not installing the bad one that people, no, have it update itself. This checks and validates that the downloads it's getting are actually the right ones and are safe and secure. So in summary of security, there we go. Build reliability and empathy into your products. If you're going to collect data, make it explicit. People need to understand the data you're collecting. And then if you collect it, please secure it. And if you can't properly secure it or you don't have the resources to secure it, don't ask for it. Period, end of story. It's your responsibility to secure data that you ask for. And then finally, handle problems and errors. Empower rather than blame. If you think about, you go to a restaurant and have a bad experience, you don't get blamed for that. The restaurant doesn't say, well, you were a bad, patron. No, instead you say, I want to talk to a manager, and the manager does whatever they can to help make that situation better. Imagine if your product errors out, and rather than saying, oops, 405 error, 500 OX, whatever it is, what if it said, hey, it looks like you were trying to accomplish this. Here's a help ticket about, or a help article about this. Or do you want to talk to support? Click here to start a chat. Help me solve my own problem. Try to get in front of that. And of course, build your products so that they don't error out. But if they do, and those error states, build empathy into them. Transparency is another one that I really like. Apple does this really well. This is something that they're going very big on. I encourage you, if you want examples of how a company is building security and privacy into your products, go to apple.com/privacy. Literal examples of how they're building their products with privacy and security in mind. They're very upfront about what data they're collecting. They use this little handshake that I really like. It's like an agreement. I'm going to give you data and you're going to give me value. And I can clearly understand what that means. These are not legalese terms and conditions. These are real human explanations of what a product and service is doing. Twitter, as much as I maybe don't like Twitter, this is a really well-designed privacy control center. The defaults are another question. They're all on by default, which isn't great. But it at least tells me what it's doing, a description that's understandable, and if I want to go learn more, there's a link off to that. And then I can actually toggle and control it. I can control what Twitter does. That's awesome. Here's an example of what I call Don't Be Creepy. This is a sleep cycle app that I use that basically, you turn it on, it listens for sound and movement using the gyroscope of your phone to give you a sleep score. What it does, however, though, is that it looks on the network that you're on for other people who are in that network. Let me tell you the use case here is that if you and your partner both use this app, you're in the same bed and they want to use the data from each of your phones to cancel out movements if your partner gets up in the middle of the night. I'm a single man. This was 2 a.m. when I woke up at a hotel. Emil is my coworker. Why does this app broadcast Emil to my phone? And on Emil's phone, it says, Taylor McCaslin, iPhone X. What? This is something behind, I'm on a VPN on a hotel Wi-Fi network in the middle of the night, and someone can detect if I'm there using this app. That's creepy. I don't care if you had a good use case for this. This is just obvious that you should not broadcast this kind of information. So that brings me to smart defaults. Know what defaults you're opting your customers into. This is actually the recommendation that I have for you to go set to your lock screen. Today, I can walk up to your locked iPhone and I can trigger Siri and I can ask it to call your wife or tell me what's next on my calendar or call my dad. Turn these things off. Turn everything but return missed calls. You don't need these things on a lock screen, especially now with Face ID where literally you look at it and it's unlocked. Know what you're signing your customers up for with defaults. So in summary here, be honest and act with authenticity. Make it clear what you're collecting and what you're doing with that data. Use smart privacy defaults and explicitly state when behavior changes. If you're auto-updating my program and you're changing the behavior that I expect, tell me about that. So finally, if you're wondering how do I actually do this in my companies, talk to your users who use them. They will tell you mind-blowing things that you never would have thought about your products. And when I say talk to your users, I mean really listen to them. Ask them why. And when they tell you, oh, it's because I want to do that, ask them, why do you want to do that? Ask again, because you want to get down to that root cause of what is the problem you're actually trying to solve. Deeply understand the situations that they're in and why they're using your products. And then finally, empathize with them. Maybe. There we go, empathize. If you do this with your products, you will build better products and you won't make some of these blatant mistakes that we've seen today. Ultimately, building trust is not easy in technology products, but it's worth it. That's all I've got. Thank you. I probably got to run away, so thanks for coming, and I'll hang out and answer questions.